Even though it's impossible to deny that climate change affects human health, even if climate change is widely recognized as health threat #1, it remains to be a challenge to create the change and the justice that so many communities around the world so urgently need. Tonight we discuss exactly how climate change affects human health and how health professionals are dealing with this right now. And more importantly, we discuss what global change might be needed to avert further disaster. And I think most importantly, we're raising the voices of health professionals tonight as advocates for climate action. My name is Kees Fukema. I'm a program editor here at the Bali. It's my pleasure to welcome you here and also to moderate tonight's evening. Every 6 months, the Bali organizes these evenings with Artsen, zonder Grenzen, Doctors Without Borders, or Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF. And we've been on topics such as pushbacks, the mental health of health professionals, and of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. And for now, before we continue tonight's debate and tonight's urgent topic, I would like to invite Director of MSF to the stage here and to join me here, Judith Sargentini. Would you please give her a warm round of applause? So it seems, yeah, a very warm round of applause indeed.
For the topic.
For the topic, I hope. My thoughts. On this topic, and this is maybe a very straightforward question, maybe even a boring question, but why is this topic so important for MSF? Why are we here tonight?
Because where we work, we see the impact of climate change. I was in Chad in July, visiting projects about malnourishment for little children and their mothers and pregnant women. And there is malnourishment from time to time in countries like Chad, which is in the Sahel. But the time in which people have to do without food gets longer and longer. It was always called the lean season, which from a Western perspective sounds nice, getting a bit leaner. The lean season is the time when your food has finished and you can't get the next crop off the land.
So you have to depend on whatever you had left in terms of stock.
Yeah, so it's finished, but the next harvest is not ready. And that is a standard thing in the Sahel, but it's a standard thing of a month, 1.5, and it's getting longer and longer. And that's climate change. And there is not a war going on in Chad. So this is not caused because of insecurities, but because people can't travel to the market. No, it's not there and it's not affordable.
So do you feel like we now have entered into a new era of climate change where it's no longer a matter of planning ahead and thinking of future impact, future damages, but it's more imminent and more deadly and immediate than ever?
Well, I'd say it's here and now. Somalia has a drought with a food problem. Floods in Pakistan, people say, have to do with climate change. The Sahel, Nigeria. So yes, it's a crisis that is now and here. And for a humanitarian medical organization we do emergency aid. When you go to when you go and help with an earthquake, a natural disaster, there's a start and an end to it. You move in, you do your work, and at a certain point you can leave. But that is getting more and more difficult.
Yeah, still we call it a crisis, a climate crisis, but actually it's more of a condition that we have to deal with from now until the end, probably, of time. So I just wanted to set the tone for tonight.
To get you a bit upbeat.
Okay.
Well, the warning is that emergency organizations can't cope with this because it's just too big.
Yeah.
You can't look at us saying, help us out here, there's a crisis, come and rescue people.
And tonight we're extending this debate far beyond just emergency organizations. We're talking to climate advocates who are right now from Gambia, for example. We'll get there later. We're talking to high officials at the World Health Organization. What are you hoping to hear tonight in terms of things we can achieve in this here room tonight? What do you hope to hear?
Perspective. because I do not pretend that Médecins Sans Frontières knows everything about the topic. We're being confronted with it, but we need others to advocate with us, and we need to learn from others to see the wider perspective. So that's, I guess, is what I want to learn and see. And it's a coalition building exercise in which we want to take part.
Okay, so we'll be back in the end after this jam-packed program, which we will all hope we will enjoy very much. But we'll be back with you to see if those goals were met. For now, thank you very much. We have a short video, and then I'll invite the new guest later on. But we can watch the video right now.
The science is clear. Our global environment is changing. Temperatures and sea levels are rising, and we'll see more frequent and extreme weather events like heat waves, cyclones, and floods. People will be forced to leave their homes. We know that the most vulnerable people will be the most affected. We know this because we're already seeing them in our waiting rooms.
We do know that the environment has an impact on health. We are seeing now malaria in places where they were not before because the mosquito now can survive. We see introduction of mosquito-transmitted diseases such as Zika or dengue in urban settings in a larger scale. If the water changes temperature, the Vibrio cholera can survive easier. So there is a direct link between environment and environmental conditions, and mainly the vector-transmitted diseases. We can cure people, but we also have to avoid making people sick.
The climate crisis is a public health crisis. We must take action together.
Yeah, so notice how we already set the tone quite a bit in the short introduction, but also in the video. For now, I would like to invite the first two guests, Amrish Baiju and Saskia van der Kam. Please give them a warm round of applause. And so in this first bit, in this first panel discussion, we're going to not only set the tone, but also set the problems and the definitions of the problems, and try to see what you as two health professionals can tell us and explain to us about what you're seeing at the moment. I'm going to briefly introduce you properly. I'm going to start with you, Imrish. You're an epidemiologist and a director of operational research at MSF, which we now all know is Médecins Sans Frontières, but from now it's MSF. And you're also a senior lecturer at the London School of Tropical Medicine. And in your daily work, you supervise projects of MSF, but we'll talk about your work in the plenty. On my right, here, Saskia van der Kam, a nutritionist specialist at MSF, so a different expertise entirely, but we'll see where the overlap is. And your current focus is on convalescence feeding, and we'll discuss that. But first, Amrish, I would like to ask you, we watched that short video just now. We can already see them in the waiting rooms, is a quote that I picked up. What do you recognize from your own work? What immediately struck you from this video?
Well, one of the things that we see increasingly, I think, is climate change as a system crisis, right? So yes, we see direct impact of disease. We see diseases expanding, indeed, as mentioned in the movie, in places where we saw it less. We see at the same time that many countries are facing, also due to the COVID pandemic, issues with their health systems, right?
And what do you mean with health systems as opposed to a health crisis, for example?
Yeah, so a health system is something like having a public health agency, having the national capacity to respond to anything related to public health. Let me give you an example. In the scope of malaria, for example, almost all countries that have malaria have so-called national malaria programs, which means they distribute bed nets, they make sure there's sufficient diagnostic capacity and treatment available for people. And many of these programs are being compromised at the moment, also due to reduced funding, due to the COVID pandemic, due to donors not focusing on it, but also due to climate change and the needs just becoming higher on that front as well.
Okay, and we're going to come back with you on how these outbreak diseases are directly affected by climate change and its effects. And hopefully we'll discuss plenty more examples as well. And Saskia, convalescence, that's a word I just pronounced, but would you mind helping us understand what that is?
Yeah, no, convalescence is when you are getting better, and nutrition can play a role in that. But actually, now my focus is far more on food security and malnutrition. We try to be flexible in MSF.
Because you did also mention the malnutrition in Chad as a very something she saw in her personal experience. But if you can take some time to explain to us, what is the direct relationship for you between climate change and malnutrition?
I'm very happy that Chad was brought up, because the climate change in other countries are straight in your face. In South Sudan, it's not drying up. Pakistan is flooded. Drought in Somalia. But Chad is not mentioned. And why? Chad is really, year after year, malnutrition increases, food security goes down, because it's not a sudden disaster, it's creeping. This year, UNICEF announced that they reduced the number of health centers they would support for treatment of malnutrition. And what's going on, it's a bit dry. It's a bit of a climate change every year and every year. Men go, there's not enough for the family, men go to the big city to earn some money.
And some more the next year. And
no, well, they don't come back. That's the basic thing what's going on. They don't come back. They can't earn money, so they stay away for 5 years. Mother and children stay behind, and she has to walk every year longer to get the water. Now, easily they walk 4 hours a day for the water. So what happens to the children? They have to economize. There's no healthy food for children. Children need quality food. We Dutch know they need milk. Okay, but that's expensive. So that's the first thing they delete in the diet. The other thing is breastfeeding. Maybe she likes to breastfeed, but if you walk for water, you leave your child behind. I mean, it's not doable.
So you're talking about all these slow creeping motions. But as Judith also said, you are an emergency organization. That's your mandate originally. So what on a day-to-day basis do you see are the immediate effects of this malnutrition? What is your research there? I heard something about a plumpy nut, for example.
Yeah, we are an emergency organization. That means that we try to pick up the people and try to treat them to avoid morbidity and mortality. So that's the emergency part. So
and where do you work mostly?
For treatment of malnutrition, it's the beginning of the century. Before that, we treated all children with milk, and in hospitals. So you can imagine. I think it was about 25 days they stayed in the hospital, mother and child. So that was very, very difficult for families to do that. But suddenly some bright professors came up with peanut butter, with a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And you could just give it for use at home.
And this is something MSF would do to immediately alleviate the pressures of malnutrition?
Yeah, the idea is that you pick them up early. Not when they are ready to go to hospital and you hope they will survive. No, you do it earlier, at home. You see them once a week or once in 2 weeks. And the children are happy sucking their plumpy nut, the peanut butter.
So a plumpy nut is, just that we're over the subject of the plumpy nut, it's a sort of a peanut butter superfood that you can help to alleviate immediately.
Yeah, it's basically peanut butter with some milk powder. And a lot of healthy vitamins and minerals, and all in one sachet. So you don't need tools or so. You just cut a corner of the sachet, and they can so squeeze it out.
Yeah, and so now increasingly the MSF is not no longer in the realm of emergency only, but trying to tackle these large-scale movements such as climate change. How does that change your day-to-day work?
Food security now, malnutrition, is a huge problem. And actually, we don't know how huge. On one hand, what we see now with food security, malnutrition, climate change is one of the main drivers. The other one is, of course, economy. And these two main drivers, they don't go away. It's what Judy said. It is a realm for the coming years. We have to live with it. And that changes so that we have to change the perspective what we are doing or how we go about it. And one of the, as we are saving lives with doctors and nurses, we are not the ones who are doing the food security cash for food and all those difficult programs. We don't know how that works.
Yeah.
So our other wing is what we're doing is trying to advocate for that and with experts who know who to approach and how to do that. But they need proof that something is going on, and there is something going on. That's for sure.
Okay, we'll get back to that. Amrish, you already we're jumping into the systemic change that we need, and I think this is definitely the spirit, because tonight we're going to have to talk about systemic solutions, I believe. But first, before we get there, long before COVID ever broke out, you were already an expert at crisis management in the field as a field epidemiologist. You also brought a picture here tonight from Bangladesh, where can you tell us what we're seeing if the picture pops up about the immediate effects of climate change and health?
Yeah, so Bangladesh is a country that's well known that deals with floods every year. So large parts of the country and definitely some regions are underwater. But what we now see is really an increase of the impact. So this monsoon season, which is typically when you expect the floods, was especially heavy. These are actually pictures from 2020. I'm in a plane there flying from Cox's Bazar, the Rohingya refugee crisis. I'm sure many of you remember that occurrence in 2017, back to Dhaka. And basically what you see over that quite long stretch of flight and land that you cover is huge flooded parts. And just imagine, giving it a human perspective, if you live there, and this happens reoccurring, and every year you basically have to rebuild your house. You have no security of income nor food security whatsoever. You're difficult to reach, and it's not so hard to move. And this happens year after year. So I think what was mentioned just now is also you see more people kind of going to urban areas, which also creates complexities. And what you see here, it's basically the stacking of crises.
Yeah.
Which climate change is by itself, right? I mean, we deal with an array of problems. Climate change is definitely something that's going to be systemic, and we are just we do the best what we can do as an emergency organization, but we can't change systems. We can just advocate and show these type of images of impact that is here, and it's going to escalate in the coming years. It's not going to become any better, and it worries us a lot.
Yes, and I think when we talk about these issues, we tend to pick them apart quite a bit and see, for example, a zoonosis or an outbreak disease as something that's one thing, and climate change and malnutrition as the other. Yeah. But no, you're telling us that
they're interlinked.
Yeah.
And we know that. Even when we wouldn't be speaking about climate change, we know that malaria does well, or the mosquito does well in places where you have bodies of water.
Right.
Now we deal with dengue, Zika, where we have...
Zika is a disease that was also a crisis in South Africa.
Yeah, South America at the time, but it kind of globally spread, started in Asia, where you have a mosquito that is adapted in a way that it can create a lot of eggs, and the eggs are so resilient, even when you keep them dry and they get wet again, the next season, for example, a lot of these mosquitoes come out, and they're very hard to kind of get rid of. So that means that our work is not just focused on treating patients, it's also very much focused on what can we do to actually prevent. So the classic basics of public health, what can we do to help communities to prevent disease? So prevent that people come sick and that they come to our hospital, which is often the end point. And what you see in that is that for many of the, let's say, the old classical diseases, that they are on a return.
Old classical diseases.
HIV, tuberculosis, malaria. We were making a lot of progress.
Diseases that we were waving goodbye quite eagerly.
Waving goodbye is a bit too ambitious, I would say. But we were making progress. Countries were gaining a lot of strength in strengthening their own national programs. And the roles that MSF played was really those patches where difficulties were...
And do you think this now becomes clear that those national programs with perhaps a more sectoral view, less systemic view, and every country for itself, that it is clear now that was suffering from shortcomings that we...
I think like one key component is funding in that. The other one is prevention. Right. So if we don't have to deal with climate change, if we don't have to deal with the causes, MSF is an organization, we deal with consequences. But there are causes to those consequences. And if we can prevent those or mitigate those or suffer how hard they will impact, our work will also become a little bit lighter, and it's full as it is already. It's a worry because this is going to affect large amounts and large numbers of people if you look at the impact of climate change.
Right. How are you listening to this?
Yeah, you're very much connected because malnutrition is caused by a lack of food or lack of proper food, but it is an interplay with diseases. A malaria epidemic is connected with a malnutrition epidemic. Cholera is now on the rise. You see it in several countries now. For me, unexpected, maybe not for you, but it's directly connected with malnutrition. And it, besides how it works in your body, it's also if the children start at a lower malnutrition level and they get the disease, their outcome is worse.
Yeah, and just as systemic as the causes are for these diseases and crises, just as systemic are the outcomes, because a health crisis will never just stay a health crisis, because as you
yeah, it's very systemic. And you mentioned a few times funding, but it's a little bit broader than that. In that sense, the countries where we work, the government has not so much to spend for healthcare. They got loans for COVID measures. They have to pay back those loans now. UN is quite careful in what they are doing. WFP cut a lot of rations in half and stopped also other places. I told you UNICEF has difficulties. So it's not only the problems getting worse, but also the help they get is less. The government can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. And yeah, where are the others?
Okay. Well, keep this in mind, because at some point we're going to have to talk about solutions with the other panel. So I'm going to write this all down. But the systemic character, the systemic nature of these health crises. Would you also see more pandemics in the future because of climate change, more COVID-type scenarios as well?
Yeah, I mean, generically speaking, there is a strong relationship between large groups of people together that are more vulnerable because of malnutrition. Your immune system works less well, especially for children. And what you also often see is a large clustering of, for example, livestock, so animals, and people together. And that means that you create the perfect breeding room for new pathogens or pathogens that mutate. And therefore,
pathogens being the
diseases,
right.
So the bugs that make us sick, basically. And that means you're creating all the perfect conditions to increase the likelihood of such an event happening.
Yeah.
And climate change is definitely a driver behind this as well. It's been well documented and researched as well. So also here, being the director of one of the research units in MSF, I'm not here to say we need to do more research on climate change. We know what the effects are today. We'll know what will happen if we continue this trend. The question is really like, how do we prepare ourselves to deal with the consequences, and how do we mitigate some of the consequences?
So like the video said, it's already here. We don't need further proof, and that's basically what you're saying. Yeah. We don't have time to research anymore. For now on, it's systemic solutions to systemic problems, yeah, and nothing else.
Yeah, and a climate change crisis is such impactful that we hardly can anticipate on the effects that what the true impact will be. Right, and they're far-fetched, much beyond disease, much beyond malnutrition. You deal with political instability. You deal with mass numbers of people moving from one place to another.
All these migrative moves will cause pressure on certain cities, on certain nations,
absolutely,
on government deficits.
Yeah. And also this has been well documented. Again, like there is no lack of proof in this aspect.
In all divisions of science.
Yeah.
So okay, so what then? What else can we do? Because we have MSF sort of already pointing to this quite loudly, advocating for more systemic solutions. Why is it not working? Why aren't the polluters simply paying, and why aren't we working towards systemic change, systemic solutions?
Well, yeah, MSF is not an expert in systemic solutions. We are the band aids. I think you have to separate it. If you also, when you talk about climate change, I know the discussion will be also about how do we help, how do we fund, and I think you should really separate funding for systemic solutions from humanitarian aid. And you see now it's becoming tight. The money, there's a tendency to put it all in one pot. No, we should really take care of that.
So divide the funds across different portfolios, different funds.
Different funds.
Right. So not stack it all on all the ministries for
it's completely
public
different.
health?
Saving lives and preventing diseases, etc. is completely different from what you can do to prevent the large problems in the future.
So just like tonight we're saying the climate crisis, also a health crisis, every move in governments all over the world should be towards systemic climate and systemic health solutions.
Yes,
and not in sectoral different pots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it should not prevent actions to help people surviving.
Yeah.
Now, right now, because what you say is in the future, but now people are suffering as well.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one more question, but I'm also going to see if there's a question from the audience for these two experts right here. But for now, I'll quickly ask you guys. So we're going to later talk to a policy advisor, to a Dutch politician, a Dutch member of parliament, and a very high official from the WHO. So I have the wonderful luxury to have two MSF professionals here. What is your most important message to them later on? Starting with you.
I think what is really important to acknowledge is indeed that the impact's already here. I see in many places that are a bit more fortunate to kind of not have to deal with the direct impact of climate change. There's very much still a debate if it's real or not and how urgent is it.
Yeah.
It's urgent. It's here for a large part of people that we are trying to help and assist actually on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And if we don't change the course of direction, it will escalate. And I mean, we've seen it in other crises as well, is that governments tend to respond when the crisis affects them, which is already 7 stops too late, right? Because you had a chance to be preventive and you didn't. And I think, like was always said by my colleague, is that we have to also stay a little bit close to what we're doing. We're an emergency aid organization. We deliver medical care where the gaps are. And that's something that we need to learn from, how to also get better and how to deal with the increasing frequency as best as we can. And the other pillar of our work is the témoignage, the witnessing, telling you that it's already here, showing you it's already here.
It's almost like as a sort of from a journalist role almost.
Yeah, I mean, it's the foundation of MSF as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then play the drums and make sure that we advocate in holes like the Bali. And Saskia, what would be your main message for the panel later on?
For the WHO, it's a very normative body and it's full with very intelligent experts. But I would ask the WHO to be flexible and to change gears towards climate change and my métier then, the malnutrition.
Yeah.
But disease is also directly linked with
but because
disease.
They're linked.
Yeah.
And what shift gears? What does it mean?
To be flexible, because now there are different pillars they work on, and I assume that there are constraints with funding to shift gears towards the climate change and related diseases.
Yeah. I wonder if there are, at this point, any questions from the audience, which I assume over there in the back. And Rogaya, the program editor, will come towards you with the microphone.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Laurens. I'm from the Municipal Health Department in Amsterdam, and I'm an environmental medical doctor. I've got a question for Emrich, because you said if we don't act now, it could escalate. But if we act now, we will see effect over 20 years, because climate change will go on. Can you do any projections on, what do you expect?
It's a very good question, and you're absolutely right? Even if we would act now, if you look at the IPCC reports, the scenarios, even in the most optimistic cases of reducing whatever CO2 targets or emission targets we have, it's probably going to be too late. Well, it is already too late because we see the consequences day to day. I think that is kind of like the main argument to say, like, what we could do if we act now is kind of reduce or maybe level off, right? So the peak of impact will be not as high in the future, we hope, or maybe not an increasing amount of countries will be detrimentally hit. And sorry, I forgot the second part of your question.
Well, now you're already answering my questions.
Okay.
Yeah, what are the projections about the highest impact, and when will that be?
So impact is an incredibly complex thing, because I said, and we mentioned that is because it's a systemic crisis. We see primary impact. So primary impact on, let's say, the increasing number of certain diseases we can make with huge confidence intervals. So there's quite some uncertainty. So we try to not always go into negative, in the most negative scenarios, but you have to stack it up. On top of that, you see, of course, that when you deal with increased political instability, that is something that is not as easy to forecast. We know it might happen, but it's very context dependent. And that, of course, affects the way that we work and the level of operations as well. So basically what we say is, like, within our array of operations that we have in different areas, how can we become better in it? But the exact impact, impossible to predict, aside that it's already not super good.
One more question?
Yeah, so I was wondering, you said that currently with climate change increasing the amount of problems worldwide, to what extent are you more unable to deal with the problems you face today compared to 10 years ago? And how do you think that'll change in the coming 10, 20 years?
Oh, 10 years ago. I think I'm in this métier already 35 years or something. So I told you already about in the beginning, in the very beginning we didn't know what to do. But then milk type of treatments came, that was in hospital. Then you say Plumpinut, but the correct term is RUTF, ready to use therapeutic food. Plumpinut is a brand.
I remember that. And I'm not promoting Plumpinut.
Exactly. So that was already a relief that you could cover far more people, children, people. But now our next move is not only MSF, but of the whole humanitarian movement, is to go out to the communities in a very simple way. Normally we would go out with a car and a nurse and a doctor, etc. But now we will go out with, or we are going out with community health workers, so very low level. They do the basic treatment of diarrhea, malaria, and pneumonia, and we add measuring nutrition. Sometimes we add treatment of malnutrition, but that's a bit tricky because that person lives in the community with quite a pile of RUTF, which is very popular. So that's a bit tricky.
Oh, no, okay. I'm not saying Plumpinut.
But that will be the future, and now we are teaching mothers to measure their own children. And that is, I think, it sounds simple, and it is simple, but it's really a revolution because you give also some power in the hands of the mothers. They can monitor their own children. It's really successful. Yeah. But we are in the beginning of it. But I think that will be the future, to give more power to the people.
So give more agency to all the people in the field.
Exactly, and it goes for disease detection as well, right? Outbreaks start in communities, so early detection of outbreaks in these communities is very important because they then don't escalate and you can respond earlier. And indeed, the asset of community health workers is really important, as well as, like, if you involve communities in, the extension arms of the work that you're doing, you empower communities. You find talent in communities, and that's really a change that we're more proactively in the humanitarian community, as well as in MSF, are making, by necessity as well.
And that these communities, as such, also probably much better understand the local infrastructure and the local demands for justice and the local demands for...
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. I'm hoping I can come back to you in the end, but for now I'm going to thank you for your contribution in this panel. Please a warm round of applause for Saskia and Amrish. And so I also briefly brushed upon the subject of justice, but I think we'll get into that much more from now when we talk to on climate mitigation about polluter pay principle as such. But for now, I'm delighted to announce a video call with two climate activists, and we're lucky to have them on Zoom. So I think Anissa and Joe, if you can hear us right now, it would be very nice to see your faces. We're on the phone with Anissa Beck. She's a Libyan youth climate activist and the founder of Project Mulan. a youth-led project that aims to spread and achieve the United Nations Development Plan for Sustainable Development Goals in Libya. And she's also the national leader of Let's Do It World and Fridays for Future, that we all know from Greta Thunberg, of course, in Libya. And also on the Zoom line with us is Joe Bongay, and he is Executive Director and co-founder of Young Volunteers for the Environment and Youth Alliance in Gambia. So also focusing on the improvement for quality of life and ecosystem and the standard of living for the people in Gambia. So thank you for having you both. It's again, it's yeah, I can see them every. Can we please make it so that we can also see the wonderful faces of Joe and Anissa on the big screen behind me? But for now, Joe, Anissa, it's a great privilege to have you here. How have you been listening to the discussion thus far, Anissa? I can see her over here.
I've noticed that you've been speaking about malaria and like how it's affecting. I caught up on some points that probably I'm going to be like countering some of those and giving something slightly different from the conversation. Not in any way saying that what was mentioned is not valid, just bringing something different to the table, hopefully.
Yeah, it would be our honor to hear that. So, how are you witnessing the effects of climate change in your country, for example, right now, and specifically related to health and public health issues? And how can you add to the discussion what you just heard?
Okay, so in terms of the discussion, we were talking, well, you guys were mainly talking about how like some species are being affected by climate change, they're declining, and talking about mosquitoes and malaria mainly in Africa. So one of the effects that we have of climate, of course, there's two types of effects. There's those that are man-caused, and there's ones that are just a direct effect because of like the rise in temperature. So some of the issues that we have, environmental issues in Libya here, for example, in the east where most of the oil wells are, we have a lot of oil spills. So you would see people with some sort of skin infections and eye infections. It's very common, but mainly literally half of the population of the eastern side of Libya is now struggles with cancer.
Okay, so
and you don't see people talking about it as much as they should.
So these are.
And as for the western and the southern parts, because of the rise in temperature, we're having more sandflies. So the same issue with mosquitoes. Now, sandflies are similar to mosquitoes in terms that they need humid areas or places where there's water in order for them to reproduce. But they have been adapting like insanely. With the heat waves, we're having more sandflies than usual because we're having serious water scarcity, especially in the south. In fact, southern Libya doesn't have access to water. We need to have the water shipped literally from the northern part to the south in order to provide people with water. They don't have like oases or any running rivers or any ponds. So the fact that there's a huge number of sandflies is alarming. It's causing many people to struggle with leishmania. I don't know if you are familiar with this disease, but there's different types.
I'm not familiar with that disease, but Nisa, so you're describing these just like Saskia did, creeping movements, things that are indirectly related to temperature rise and climate change, and that we don't normally incorporate in the discussion on climate change. And do you also see, because we've been discussing the social effects and the political effects as well, such as conflicts rise, violence rise, maybe due to migration streams. Is this also something you're currently observing and witnessing in Libya?
Of course, because Libya is the main migration port from most African countries to Europe.
Right.
And it is also a state that's been struggling with conflict for the past 10 years. And actually, conflict is the main topic that I am focusing on in my field of studies.
Right.
In a country like Libya, where it's mainly it's a source of it's where the resources come from.
Right.
So we're not talking Libyans making the best of the resources, but we also have struggles with foreign interventions, and where colonialism plays part basically in the whole climate issue, and how, for example, we've been talking about the Green Deal in Europe and how it actually should be including some North African countries, because there's like some policies that contradict itself. So, for example, in France, they're saying that they're stopping fracking on their own land, but they continue doing that in former colonies such as Algeria.
Right.
So this raises like a lot of questions here about like the whole no one's being left behind.
Yeah.
And in fact, people are already being left behind because of these policies, where like some countries in the south are still being used for their resources, which basically doesn't enable them to make that transition towards renewable energy or make that sort of, let's say, investment, unlike Western countries, which makes it like very difficult for us to believe that we can like work together.
Yeah.
And also it's causing a lot more conflicts.
Yeah.
So conflict over resources is becoming very common. Tunisia with their water issue, like we've already started having issues where them
Nisa,
saying that we are at.
Nisa, I think you're doing an extremely well job at describing just how systemic indeed all these problems are, and just how how difficult it is to tackle this myriad of problems. But I think on the subject of justice and what the responsibility of Western polluting countries is, I want to come back to you later and elaborate on that, because I think that's very important for the discussion we're going to have later on. But for now, I also want to introduce Joe Bongay, who is also on the stream with us, and want to talk about the situation in Gambia more specifically. Joe, are you able to hear us? I cannot see you, Joe. Ah, you can see. Okay, I'll just talk to Joe. So Joe, how are you listening to Nisa, and how similar is it to the effects you're witnessing in Gambia, for example? Are you still on mute?
All right.
Joe.
Yes.
Welcome,
Can you hear
Joe.
me now? Thank you very much for this great opportunity to share information on climate change and health, which is very timely as we are actually getting to the COP27. We are all aware now that climate change is the biggest challenge we face in the world today, and everywhere we see its impact. And of course, people are struggling with the devastating effects in their daily lives in the country that I live, called the Gambia. And this is becoming more challenging for many Africans, which the Gambia is part of, even though they are historically less responsible for causing climate change. The African region is hit hardest by its consequences. So basically, the entire climate change issue is the single biggest health danger facing humanity. And we must agree also that health professionals in Africa and of course worldwide are already responding to the health harms caused by this unfolding crisis. So climate change is already impacting health in a myriad of ways, including by leading to death and illness from increasing frequently extreme weather events such as heat waves, storms, and floods, the disruption of food. We can see as well increases in zoonosis and food, water, and vector-borne diseases and mental health issues. Right. So basically, climate change cut across between health and economic issues. And we can also witness that it has also affects the social and environmental determinants of health. That is the clean air. Yeah, hello?
Yeah, no, please finish your sentence, Joe, and then I have a question for you. Ah, that was it. So
yes,
all these, I think you also did very well to describe all these determinants of public health that are affected by climate change and by the pollution that mostly Western countries have created. So. Speaking of this loss and damages, so the big damage that's already that you see right in Gambia and the emergent health crisis that you see, in terms of justice, what do you expect from the Netherlands, for example? What do you expect from this debate hall here in the Bali tonight? How should we take responsibility?
Well, actually, when you look at, I want to pick it up from the IPCC, which says the 1.5 wall happens in 2013. So basically, we are actually trying to push the issue of loss and damage, because there have been the $100 billion pledge from Western countries. And of course, we could see the back and forth, failure to these pledges that has been agreed upon in terms of supporting the less emitters to be able to adapt to the effects of climate change, which is caused by the industrialized nation. Like the current text on finance need much strengthening in the coming days, and as well as there are no excuse, I think, for the 100 billion climate finance to not be met already in this upcoming COP. And of course, the issue of climate justice from the developed nation is about supporting them to be able to adapt to the effects of climate change, and as well as to be able to build the resilience that they needed, because they need the right infrastructures, the right technologies, and as well as they also need the right scientific information to be able to put, prepared measures able to adapt to the consequences of this global crisis called climate change. So if this upcoming COP, we are anticipating that African countries like my country will definitely be looking forward to tell the true African story, and as well as looking forward, to demand compensations, not just pledges, but very concrete action in making sure that they deliver the promises that has been, downplayed and played around for many COPs. And we need not to, beg for it anymore, but just to be compensated, and as well as have our equal share in terms of what the world had for us previously, because we could see the diminishing effects that is happening, across the globe. So
Joe,
if nothing,
I'm sorry to stop you there, Joe, but I think I heard your call for a true African story and for fair finance and fair compensation in order to enhance climate adaptation and climate resilience in African countries. I heard your call very loudly and clearly, and I think we'll definitely take this into discussion when we talk about COP27 here later at the table. Yeah. Please stick around to listen to that, and perhaps there's even time in the end to hear from you. But for now, I think Nisa and Joe, I'm going to have to give the floor to someone else over here. But thank you again, and if the hall would please give you both a warm round of applause. Yeah, and so I'm personally increasingly convinced of the desperate urgency of climate action and fair finance and fair distribution of compensation in international context, in a cross-border context, and we'll talk about that later, like I already mentioned. But for now, I would quickly build a bridge towards the Dutch situation, because yeah, let's not forget that we're here in the Netherlands. And I would like to give the floor to Jeffrey Corsi, who will take us through some of his research as a global health doctor, and will specifically shed some light on the health crisis here in the Netherlands. So the floor is yours, Jeffrey, and then later we're going to finally have to talk about solutions and about justice.
Okay, thank you all. I want to talk about the impact of climate change on the public health here in this country, in the Netherlands. Let's go through, first have some context, then look at the effects, and then the conclusion. So, environment is often seen as something abstract or something that's hard to grasp, but it is very much related to health. 1 out of 4 deaths worldwide, calculated by the WHO, is related to the environment, which amounts to 12.6 million deaths per year. A lot. And when we think of climate change, as we've heard until now, Lancet, the leading medical journal in the world, has called it the biggest threat to human health of the 21st century. And then we see droughts, food insecurity, hunger, conflict, mass migration, all these very dramatic effects. And when I was reading this, it's like, it seems very far away from me. It seems very distant. And to what extent does it also apply here to Holland? So that's the question that I asked, and together with other public health doctors and researchers, we looked at the evidence of the last 10 years of how climate change is affecting the Netherlands. So we published that last year in the leading Dutch journal of medicine, and that's what I want to speak about today. So the climate effects. Broadly speaking, there are 5 main health effects, 5 health clusters: heat-related diseases, allergic diseases, air pollution-related diseases, infectious diseases, and ultraviolet radiation-related diseases. Let's go through them. So heat. We've seen that the average temperature per year in the Netherlands has increased. It has increased over all seasons. Netherlands warms twice as fast as the world average. We've seen more summer days. We've seen less ice days. We've seen more days with warmer water temperature, more tropical nights, and this is also projected to increase further. So heat-related disease. Thinking of the 3 largest, or the 3 worst natural disasters in the Netherlands the last 40 years. When did they happen? And what were they? 2003, 2006, 2019. All heat. Heat waves cause a lot of deaths, up to from 650 to 1,000 deaths in the summer. If this would be a flood or something, it would be a big scandal, but because it's heat and because it's slow and because it's creeping, we don't see it as much, but it has a high impact. So this acts through heat stress, through the exacerbation of kidney diseases, through dehydration, aggravation of heart disease, heat strokes, and the list goes on, because we have more sleep disturbances, more labor productivity, less concentration, so more labor accidents, more sick leaves, more social unrest, also more violence, more intergroup violence is observed, more people with psychological complaints, and people with pre-existing psychiatric complaints also are likely to be admitted to the hospital, and also have more suicides. So heat is actually an important factor. Also, without climate change, we would have heat waves. But 30% of the heat is related to the climate change. It can be attributed to climate change in terms of deaths. This was calculated last year and was published in the Nature Climate Change, which amounts to 250 deaths per year in the Netherlands already, which is a lot, and it's not not really talked about as much. Is the Netherlands at risk? Let's look at the risk factors. Elderly are at risk because they have chronic diseases. They also have certain medications like diuretics, like antipsychotic medications who don't function as well on higher temperatures. Urban people, poor people because they have substandard houses, less means to also ventilate themselves. Obese people because they can't cool off easily, and lonely people. This one is also an important one because lonely people are very much at risk because, as we see, as we've heard before, heat is very much creeping up to people, and especially with elderly, their thirst stimulus is not as effective, so they don't notice when they are thirsty, and then the heat can come up to them. So lonely people are very much at risk. And all these risk factors are present in the Netherlands, especially it's a very urban country, and therefore we suffer a lot from the urban heat island effect. Between urban conglomerations and rural areas, there can be a difference up to 10 degrees Celsius. This is mostly because cities take up heat, they retain heat because of bricks, concrete. They don't have so much green, which is a way of cooling. And also because there's a lot of heat production, like machines and also vehicles, and because heat is also shared. So we're suffering from an urban heat island effect in the Netherlands. And here you see some maps made out of that. Especially heat and loneliness together is a killer, which is very high in Amsterdam, as you can see. Not so much green, not a lot of trees to evaporate heat. So there's more heat. Does that mean also milder winters? It is suspected that there's also lower cardiovascular and respiratory mortality, so climate change can also have good effects. Lower morbidity, less accidents through slippiness and frost, low risk of winter smog. But the data don't show that yet in the CBS data. So it is hypothesized, but we don't see it back into in the data. Second point, second health effect is allergies. We've seen that the allergy season, the pollen season, has increased, has started earlier. It's prolonged. Also, it's become more intense, more blooming, and also the types of pollens have become more allergenic. This is because there are new kinds of pollen that have arrived from the south and who are able to thrive now in these increased temperatures. For example, the ambrosia plant from the south is much more allergenic, and now 20% of the population is already sensibilized for that, giving hay fever, allergic rhinitis, sleep disturbance, concentration problems, sick leaves, medication, etc. So this is the effects of allergies that are likely to increase and are already increasing. Third effect is air pollution-related diseases. Air pollution increases the risk of high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, diabetes. This is because of repeated hits of inflammation to the vessels and sensitive organs. In the Netherlands, this is a big thing. 12,000 people die each year because of air pollution. These can be broadly defined distinguished by three types. Particulate matter, which is like old small particles, which is a mixture of different types of substances. Then we have nitrogen oxide. Nitrogen is not only the nitrogen crisis, is a health crisis. But we don't talk about that. Maybe that's another lecture. And then ozone. Actually, air pollution has decreased the last decades and is decreasing because of better safety regulations, better emission filters. But ozone is increasing. Ozone is heat sensitive, and it is, because of climate change, increasing, and also leading to more respiratory disease and cardiovascular disease. The fourth effect is infectious diseases. We've seen more tick bites who thrive with higher temperatures, which have risen. Also the effects of that. Lyme disease, erythema migrans, encephalitis, has increased fourfold. And yes, climate change is only one part of this. It's also because of changed behavior. For example, we are more outdoors now. But climate change is one part of this. Another thing is the mosquitoes that are on the rise. We've talked about them. Aedes albopictus is already on the rise, which is the carrier or the vector of dengue, chikungunya, the tiger mosquito it's called like that. And the Culex pipens is another vector, and it carries the West Nile virus. It has already been spotted in Utrecht. And this is also because of high temperatures and water. Water-related diseases, so there's more precipitation, warmer weather, etc. And this leads to more viruses and bacteria like Vibrio, Legionella, Leptospirosis, noroviruses. And the effects of these are pneumonia, diarrhea, skin rashes because of blue-green algae. So these are the water-related diseases that we are now seeing increasing. Another thing is insect plagues. Since the 1990s, we've seen the oak processionary caterpillar, eigen processirups, which can cause intense itch, also pseudo-allergic reactions, and it's on the rise. The same with the Taponema nigerimum, which is het mediterraan draaigatje. It's a very biting and irritating ant, whose plagues are also on the rise. The same with the Asian hornet, which is the wasp whose stings are more painful than the regular bee that we have. Last one, UV-related diseases. We have more sun, so more UV radiation. This is related with skin cancer and ophthalmological disorders, eye disorders. So we've seen that the incidence of skin cancer has, I think, risen fivefold, more than fivefold in the last 30 years. Also cataract has increased threefold. So we've seen a rise of these. At the same time, it also has positive effects, of course. More vitamin D, which is related to some slight decrease of risk of some disease like prostate cancer, breast cancer. But on the whole, you can say that climate change is overwhelmingly negative. And it's not just a future risk and also not a distant risk, but actually a current burden right here in the Netherlands with significant morbidity and mortality. The limitations of this study, when we looked at all the evidence, is that it's mostly qualitative effects and not so much precise, not very precise. And the future, of course, depends on how we mitigate and adapt to the climate. So our article finishes with three dimensions. Health professionals or doctors should change the consultation room, should change how we see patients, look at more lifestyle interventions. For example, smoking is very bad for climate change. As we know, it represents 5% of the global deforestation, which is huge. It is because of the tobacco agriculture. So making like these double hits, making sure somebody quits smoking is a double hit. Same with meat consumption. So this is what we can do in the consultation room. Also, the health sector is a very polluting sector. We have a lot of waste spillage. We have a lot of waste generation. 80% of elderly people have medicines that they don't use. Medicines are also very polluting to make. And then the last one is change society by also emphasizing that health is, that the climate change is a health problem, which also maybe depoliticizes it. Because now I think climate change is very much in the left progressive corner. But if whether you're left or right, progressive, conservative, everybody is affected by these health effects. And I think we can emphasize this as health professionals. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you for your wonderful talk. I think we're going to take the conclusions and go into the final panel of this evening when we talk about discussions. But I think something that I was really hopeful to hear was that if we consider climate change as a health crisis, that we might be able to depoliticize it as an issue. And I think beyond any doubt, it is now clear that climate change is not only a health crisis internationally, but also here in the Netherlands. So thank you for that. Joris Thijssen, I would like to ask you to come over here, a member of the Dutch Parliament for the Social Democrats, Partij van de Arbeid. And before that, he was a director at Greenpeace, the Netherlands, since 1996.
No, I'm not that old.
Not that old. And also Bertram Zagema, I would like to ask you to come here, a policy advisor at Oxfam Novib, who recently wrote a very excellent paper on exactly those financial responsibilities that Western nations should take. So I think that's a very pressing point that needs to be discussed, especially after we heard Nisa and Joe talk. And also, again, on a Zoom connection, we have Maria Naira on the phone, so that's also very good to have. So Joris, you were probably very happy that we also mentioned that the nitrogen crisis is a health crisis, right? So that we at least have that also covered here tonight.
Exactly. So we solve the whole world. Yeah, that would be good.
Change society.
Exactly.
If we do that tonight.
Maybe Maria, to start with you, because you are in the digital realm. Joe and Nisa also already mentioned Yes, you start with that. Cheers. The upcoming COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. First of all, how have you been listening to tonight's discussion, Maria?
Yes, completely. From the beginning, yes, with pleasure.
Thank you. And okay, we'll jump to the COP27. After hearing tonight's discussion, what do you think at COP27 should be highest on our agenda when it comes to connecting health and climate change?
Yeah, first allow me to say that I'm very happy to be here for one reason. I mean, for many reasons, but there is one very special, which is the fact that I'm a former MSF. So I started my career with Médecins Sans Frontières France at that time, and I've been in the board of the Switzerland as well. So I'm a former and still MSF. Somehow you keep it forever.
Yeah, and I realized
I
haven't formally introduced you actually, so I'm going to quickly do that as well.
This is my best title, so keep that.
Okay. But right now, so formerly MSF, but right now you're Director of Public Health and the Environment at the World Health Organization, which also explains the lovely logo behind you. But please continue about your expectations for COP27 after I introduce you.
Okay. Well, since we don't have too much time, and this is an extremely important subject, I think the reason why we go to COP27 and why WHO and the health community has been present in COP for the last at least 17 years, believe it or not, is for one reason. One, we want to present the health argument for more climate action. I think you hear it. I will not repeat how climate change is affecting our health. You hear it from experts. I think you have the IPCC. You see it on the field. You heard the descriptions about malnutrition, about more natural disaster, intensify natural disaster, causing the problems of agricultural production, water scarcity, more epidemic diarrheal diseases because of lack of water and sanitation, more infectious diseases transmission in places where we were not expecting it, injustice, inequities, migration, name it. I think we need to be extremely well prepared now to face that. And as MSF normally have very field-oriented operations, I think you need to keep that optic in mind all the time, because you will see it permanently, how climate change is putting at risk all the things that little by little we have been trying to build over the years. They might be at risk because of climate change is affecting the pillars of our health. The second thing, the second reason why we are at the COP is because we want to convince them that if they implement good mitigation, climate change mitigation policies, they will be doing very good for health. They will be, if they reduce the combustion of fossil fuels, or better, stop the combustion of fossil fuels, and we accelerate the transition to green, renewable, clean sources of energy, that will be resulting on reducing the 7 million premature deaths we have every year caused by air pollution, very much linked to the causes of climate change as well.
Connecting health and climate change as a very desperate and urgent argument to create more climate mitigation action.
And more adaptation.
And more adaptation, and more fair funding for that, but we'll come to there. Joris, these climate conferences you've been witnessing for quite some time now. Have you, and for example, Joe Bengay, when he talks, you could notice the tremendous amount of urgency and desperate need for climate change, for more funding over there, for more action over there, for more mitigation right now. But have you noticed already a shift in discourse, but from Rio in 1992 to Glasgow last year? Or are we doing are we doing everything? Every COP is the same, and we're discussing the same thing over and over. Or do you think we have something now?
I don't know. You want to hear the hopeful story or the story of despair? But I think the hopeful story is that there has been tremendous development on the discussion on climate change. So we've come from a long way from 1992, where it was said for the first time we should, there's something like climate change and we should fight it.
Yeah.
And now it's on the top of almost every political agenda because this is the challenge of humankind to deal with.
And back then was it? Sorry.
And you see that really even in the current Dutch government, which is pretty right-wing, climate change is a very big part of what they try to achieve in the years to come. So that is, I think, a story of hope. And also, if you ask people in the street, like, what is one of the things the government should take care of, or what is a problem that we're facing at the moment, it's climate change.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good thing. Then if you look at COP27 and the expectations of the COP, then you get a bit more into despair.
Part.
Then you get a little bit into more despair.
Okay,
because
but we still have 25 days before the COP, so...
So I'll have a debate on Thursday and I'll try to convince our government to do more. But
what will you say?
More is needed. Sorry?
What will you say?
That they say all the right things. So that sounds all very lovely. But for example, to just say one thing is that the Netherlands, like many other countries, made a promise to come up with climate financing, 1.8 billion. And they've put it there, but the agreement was, okay, this is additional to the money we have at the moment for development aid.
Right.
And they've taken it out of that budget. So it's not additional. So basically, when we make this money available for the countries that need it, that we promise the climate financing to, actually we've taken it also from them, because they get less development aid. Well, that's not a way to...
in the Netherlands, we would call that vestzak, broekzak solution.
Thingy, which is not really fair.
And it's also a very a good example of still this ancient sectoral thinking and not the systemic thinking that Amrish, for example, was pledging about, that we create funds that actually do tackle it systemically.
Well, and that's, I think, another thing, not only with the climate financing, but also with development aid, is of course that you really have to see how do we use this money to really reach the people that need it most.
Yeah.
So we heard lots of examples today about people that are facing the effects of climate change, the impacts of climate change, and those are the people you try to reach to. While what our minister is currently saying is, well, we have a big pot of money, but we prefer that 70% of the money goes to Dutch companies. And then it's like, but shouldn't we take care of the people that need it most and make that the core of our policy instead of thinking about how some Dutch companies can benefit from it? So that's another, I think, very painful part of the policy that we have at the moment.
Even though all the professionals in the public health, they desperately ask for money right there to offer systemic solutions. Bertram, also welcome. So your policy paper on fair finance. Can you explain what from the discussion now we can sort of what is the urgency in your policy paper?
Yeah. So in that paper, it's called Footing the Bill.
Right.
Fair finance for loss and damage. Whatever it was called exactly. But we have looked at the database of humanitarian appeals over the past 20 years. And how many of them have been related to climate-related disasters. And you see there a big increase in the percentage but in the total number of climate-related disasters, of the number of people affected, 8 times more in 2020 than in 2000. And more or less a declining line in the percentage of coverage of the response to the appeals, to the humanitarian appeals. So, and we know that the impacts are going to go up further and further. So we know that the number of appeals and the number of affected people, look at Pakistan this year, 33 million people have been affected by the floods this year. So we know those numbers will go up, and the humanitarian system is simply not ready to deal with that.
Yeah.
So, and it's also eating up the humanitarian system, basically.
Right, because those costs are very real and very urgent.
Yes, exactly.
And not longer, maybe that was the case in 1992 when we discussed climate change. Those were costs that were still virtual and for the future, but right now they are eating.
This is even a cost that was hardly discussed in 1992, because in 1992 the focus was mostly on mitigation, so limiting the climate change, limiting the warming, basically. And a little bit of adaptation. That was already understood that there is some degree of climate change that we cannot prevent anymore. So we have to adapt to the consequences of that. And for both these things, there was an agreement. It was part of the grand deal of the climate agreement in Rio. Was we are all in this together. We have to solve it together. Everybody does their part. And the rich are going to support the poor, basically, and the more vulnerable countries, climate vulnerable countries, to do their part in mitigation and also to be able to adapt to the impacts. Yeah. And this was much later translated into the 100 billion pledge that Joe was already referring to. But what hasn't been discussed very much, and it wasn't on the agenda in Rio, definitely, it is now finally arriving at the agenda, more or less, is climate-related loss and damages.
Right, loss and damages.
Loss and damages. So there's this much you can do to mitigate. If you don't do it, you have to adapt. If you don't adapt, you're going to deal with damages and with losses of lives, losses of also cultural heritage, etc. Yeah. And that is a discussion that developing countries have been trying to put on the agenda for years, without any response from the developed countries.
And so this relatively new discourse of loss and damages is also something that's really underfooting your paper, footing the bill, where you talk about how all these different costs that we have been discussing tonight, all these intersecting causes of more and more disease, of more and more poverty, of more and more inequality, conflict, like Nisa already mentioned. How do we make sure that these costs are actually paid by someone? Because ultimately we've been talking the entire evening about the problem, and I think everyone now is fully aware that this is a systemic problem. But when do we get to systemic responsibility?
Yeah, well, so this is the big question, and I'm sorry, it's a very boring question. It's about money. Yeah. And it's about taking responsibility. And it's
no, I'm not looking at you.
Even the $100 billion pledge, which is a pledge from 12 years ago, 13 years ago, Copenhagen 2009. That's when the pledge was first made. And from the year 2020, we would have $100 billion per year available for developing countries, which, with the inflation of today, is a much lower amount than it was then. Now. Yeah. But if you compare it to the amounts that have been made available to deal with COVID, it's very little. But even the 100 billion, we are not reaching. No. And then if you look at in what ways are we reaching it, much of it is by loans. Actually, 70% of the climate finance is delivered in the form of loans, and then a large part is also in the form of private investments, which we can also count. Yeah. The half of the Dutch climate finance is private investment.
Depending on private investments.
Yeah, yeah.
Joris, how have you been listening to this? That it's still all about the money? How do we make sure the polluter actually starts paying?
Well, I think one of the ways is actually tonight is that we focus climate change not only around climate change and megatons and coal plants, but we also just say this is about life. This is about human life, about our health, about our society and the future of our society in the Netherlands and also in other places. And even the other day I had a debate in Parliament with a more right-wing party. Even if you're not too much concerned about the people elsewhere on this world, it was also said before that we'll get a lot of migration because of climate change, because we already saw last summer that some places on this planet get inhabitable. You simply cannot survive anymore as humankind, which means that people won't sit and die, they will move. Yeah. They will get conflicts. We already had a former commander-in-chief of the Dutch army who said, one of the main causes of conflict in the 21st century will be the effects of climate change.
A security crisis.
A security crisis. So, and what we see is that, well, also the example of Pakistan, you see the impacts of climate change escalating, getting bigger and bigger. And we just need to keep the pressure on, that the pressure will be big enough, and then you see, also with Corona, lots of stuff is possible. And it's still possible to stop climate change.
Is it not,
we're running out of time.
Is it not the case that if the Dutch government, to make an example, if it internalizes the climate crisis as a health crisis, then suddenly our demands as a polity would be just way too high? Is it not on purpose in that way? Because if you incorporate health in your climate strategy, then the costs will be immense, because then you have to internalize all these external costs that we've been talking about tonight, and it would make you politically probably very unpopular.
Yeah, well, maybe, I mean, I think the problem is still, even though there's so much agreement tonight between the panelists, is that we have a rather right-wing government, and there are parties in that government that are not convinced that we need to act so much on climate change.
Right.
So they're still not convinced that, yeah, this is basically a battle for our survival, and we need to push everything as far as we can to basically survive on this planet. It's not, yeah, they're not there yet.
Right. So
we need to keep on campaigning, pushing, putting the pressure on it, in Parliament, outside of Parliament. And I think that's, back to the hope, that's, I think, where the movement has grown a lot in the last 10 years. And we just need to keep pushing, because I do have the feeling we're almost there. We're getting there, but yeah, we need to keep the pressure on.
Keep the pressure on, and make sure that everyone sees that the climate crisis is a health crisis. Maria, how exactly is the World Health Organization planning on taking a stance in terms of funding? So the just funding, like Joe already mentioned, we're not looking for handouts anymore. We're not looking for simple compensation. We demand justice. How is the World Health Organization going to take a stance in 25 days at the COP?
Well, this is one of the things. We look at the Green Climate Fund. We look at the Global Environmental Fund, and all the funds that have been created for climate change adaptation. And after a careful analysis, we realized that among those funds, which are not big, by the way, only 3% of those funds are allocated to health. I mean, on the narrative of those projects, you will see that health is very much, very prominent on the description, on the justification of the project. But then when it's about allocating funds for the health sector, is less than 3% of all of those funds on adaptation for climate change. And what is very worrying as well is that what has been mentioned already, the externalities. When you do studies about the cost of climate change, you look at that all the sectors that are affected, and you look at that how countries might be suffering economically. But the externalities for the health systems are not considered. Means what is the result of keeping combusting fossil fuels? Well, the results will be the global warming with all the consequences we know. But the externalities of treating the chronic diseases caused by exposure to air pollution, caused by the combustion of air pollution, of fossil fuels, the hospitalization of all of those patients, and the chronic diseases that this is generating is already paid by the health system. So the governments are not including in the narrative for the costing of climate change the externalities caused by keeping using fossil fuels instead of accelerating the transition to renewables that will be so good for health. The cost is enormous, and the health system is already paying twice what the investment of tackling some of the causes of climate change will represent. So I think if we use the health argument, and this is what we are trying to do, we can convince the population to keep that pressure, to convince their politicians I think that the narrative until now has been very much around the planet, the polar bears, maybe the glaciers. And I think what we need to put is at front the lungs of the people for the society to understand that this is, as rightly mentioned, a question of survival. It's not saving the planet. It's not that. It's saving us from what we are causing to the planet. But if I might add a little thing here, we cannot give people on despair. I mean, on the feeling that there is nothing they can do, that this is just about money for adaptation because we need to adapt. Of course, we need to adapt and cope with the consequences of climate change. Those are already happening at an incredible speed. But we need as well to raise our voice as health professionals to mitigate, to stop the causes of climate change, to stop giving subsidies to fossil fuels. Last year, we have 45 million health professionals signing with us at the COP26 and asking politicians to stop giving subsidies, to stop the destruction of biodiversity and ecosystems, to accelerate this transition to sustainable food systems, to make sure that our cities are better planned from an urban point of view. All of the things that we can do, even as the health system, we can decarbonize our own hospitals and healthcare facilities. I think MSF should look at the policy of sending diesel engines, for instance. We need to change that. We need to put more solar panels in our operations at the field level, be very coherent. And that will make the healthcare facilities more resilient and better prepared for all of the conflicts and the horrible conditions, natural disasters that they are facing. Instead of relying on diesel, they can rely on solar panels and helping them as well to be more climate resilient. So there are plenty of things that we can do as individuals, as groups, as NGOs, as activists, as international organizations, and we have to be present in all the spectrum, from the adaptation to mitigation and the loss and damage and recovery.
Maria, so thank you for that very strong point. I think definitely it's mentioned that health professionals really need the climate as a health crisis argument in order to really become advocates of immediate climate action, to really make your case at those big conferences that immediate funding is needed along your lines. How are you listening to this? Is it going to be enough? Is it going to be adequate?
Oh, I think we need everybody to speak this kind of language. All health professionals, but also in every other field of human business, basically, because we need everybody on board, and then it's really good to if everybody talks to their own priorities. And I very much like what you said, Maria, about the benefits of stopping to burn fossil fuels, because they don't just create climate change, they also create pollution, and pollution is bad for health, but also in general bad for our lives. There's many other such benefits from the transition that we need to go through.
Right.
For example, we have an agricultural system that is very heavily dependent on chemicals, on fertilizers, on chemical pesticides, etc. That kill the soil, and soil is very important, or they kill the trees. We cut away the trees. Trees and soil biodiversity are very important to deal with the impacts of weather on the soil. So if you have a very heavy rain, it basically destroys the soil, because it turns it into concrete, more or less. But if the soil is more healthy, it can more easily deal with that. Yeah.
So you're saying, if we succeed in incorporating this health argument in even wider discussions, not only on pollution, but also on soil health, also on the food system, then this will create momentum to. Yeah.
I was actually turning it the other way around. I was going to, but this is completely true. But so what we need to do to make the transition in agriculture will also help our health, basically.
Right. Yeah. And seeing that that is interlinked as well.
Yeah, and I think there's that kind of linkages and co-benefits in every field of the big challenge that is in front of us. Yeah.
Joris, what I also hear Bertram saying is if we sort of create this hopeful image of a food system, for example, that benefits our health instead of hollowing it out, we will definitely get a much stronger rhetorical point when it comes to climate change. But very, very often, as a voter in this system, I long for that positive picture. I very much long for politicians who have a vision of the food system. How can we create more of a narrative of hope as opposed to despair?
Well, vote Partij van de Arbeid.
Well, clear.
GroenLinks, also very good.
But also...
well, I think, I mean, to be honest, if I listen to our Minister Jette, who's now of climate, I think he really understands the climate issue and he really wants to change it. His problem is he's in a coalition with two parties that are very unwilling. So they are parties that are conservative, that are protecting the vested interest, the status quo, the companies that make a lot of money with the current system. And those companies are interested in the short-term profit, not in the long-term benefits of a healthy food system or a healthy climate or renewable energy. No, they get rich by fossil fuels. And I think that's the same with... I think it's the same in the Netherlands with the food system. We have thousands of farmers every day proving how they can make a living with making nice biological food for a fair price. And it's beautiful. And if you visit those farms, you're like, hey, I'll become a farmer because this is a nice life.
No longer a politician.
The problem is there's 30,000 farmers that have marched into a different direction for 3 decades. And they're blocked in a system with high loans, with low margins, and they're exploiting nature, they're exploiting the animals, and they can't get out, and health, and they can't get out because they're stuck in the system. And there you see the vested interests, like the people that sell them the feed, the people that sell them the loans. They want to keep the system the way it is. So you see that battle going on at this moment within that coalition that tries to change it, and within society. Because we see every time when the minister says something about we're going to change the agricultural system in the Netherlands, our highways get blocked and we have protesting farmers. Because they're worried about their future.
If across the board we use this health argument more, then it suddenly wouldn't become, hey Rabobank, get a move on because it's a nitrogen crisis. Then suddenly it would become get a move on because our lives depend on it. It's a global health crisis, and then maybe judicially that becomes a different perspective and a stronger argument.
I think it's a very good argument, and the argument is being used in the debate. You just see that the pressure coming from it is not as big as the pressure that's coming from the farmers.
Right.
That's how it is as well. So. In the middle of the corona crisis, we had a debate about zoonose, which is basically corona.
Right.
So you have, it was already explained, you have lots of people and lots of animals together, and then diseases can occur. So we were challenging the Minister of Public Health and saying, you have the power to intervene. You have the power to say, we have to make sure we have less livestock in the Netherlands. And he just refused.
Didn't see the connection.
Well, he did see the connection because he's an expert on it, but the vested interests are too big.
Also, unfortunately, we had to notice that last week an international climate strategy was announced by the cabinet. It was signed by a couple of ministries, but not the Ministry of Public Health, for example. So it's definitely not part of our current thinking reflex.
No, and it's not the current narrative. So I think that's very valuable of this evening, that it's really clear, like, climate change is not only about the megatons and the solar panels and coal plants.
And the polar bears.
It's about health.
Right.
And the polar bears.
So change that narrative.
We should save the polar bears as well.
Yeah,
they're nice.
I would personally like that
But
as well.
I agree with the planet. The planet will take care of itself. We shouldn't do this for the planet. We should do it for
it's a human health crisis and a polar bear health crisis, and that's no...
And the rest of the human and the rest of the living beings.
I love them.
I think this might be a nice moment to also give the floor to some of you guys who have been listening attentively for a long time now. who have been hearing all these stories about all these issues and solutions being interlinked. So please, if you have a question to any of the panel members, please.
I have two questions, but I'll keep it very short. I'm Juliette, a medical student from the Netherlands. First one was to Maria Nera, and it was also a question in which I hope to seek some inspiration, because as a medical community, we look at the WHO as a organization of prestige, and in 2020, when Dr. Tedros took, for example, the letter from XR, that was something that marked us. How political should we be, and how should this medical community let their voice be heard when we see that we're walking towards, if the promises are made, a world of 2.4 degrees higher? And to Mr. Joris Thijssen, I was wondering, how could you help us as a medical community who is very worried, and of whom 4 of the 7 university hospitals walked along the climate march? How can you make our voice be heard and ensure that the health is taken into account with the climate policies? Because every time we reach out to politics, they send us back to the Minister of Health, and they don't talk too much about climate.
Okay, very good questions. Maria, would you mind starting off?
I think the voice of the health professionals is still very credible, not only WHO, but all health professionals, from medical students to everyone working on that. So we need to make sure that we use our voice to create some influence. Many people want us to be focusing on diseases, focusing on hospitals, focusing on care. And this is not why we are called World Health Organization and instead of World Disease Organization. So we need to deal with health. And to deal with health, you need to influence the sources of energy that a country is using, a society is using, how we commute in our cities, and how much noise and traffic incidents and pollution we create that will have impact on many diseases. We need to look at the environment, the biodiversity, the ecosystems, whether we destroy that barrier of security between animal health and human health. This intensive farming, for instance, is clearly facilitating as well the transmission of certain infectious diseases. We need to look at all different sectors that are outside of the comfort zone of the health arguments. They want us to keep concentrated on diseases. So that's why anytime I hear a respiratory diseases professional talking about asthma and saying, well, I don't want to keep treating an asthma case. I want to make sure that the area where this kid that I am treating with asthma, when they go back home, there is less level of pollution. Otherwise, what is my role as a health professional? So our voices, yes, we need to play a very political role, in the good sense of the word political, which is taking care of the common collective benefits. And we need to be very much at front on this climate change crisis, because otherwise all the pillars of our health will be destroyed. So there is no point on just keeping treating those who will be affected by this, instead of as well arguing that we need to stop the causes of this crisis.
And your question to Joris was similar. Also, how can politics you assist you in allowing that medical?
Yes. Sorry. So how can you help us as a medical community raise our voice, and not only in the health sector but also outside of it, because that's needed too?
Okay.
Well, I can invite you to Parliament, and you can give a briefing about how climate change is also a health thing. You can say, I want to file a petition to the committee, so we can actually talk to them for 10 minutes and tell them how climate change and health are very much connected. But I think I think those things would be very good to do. But what I think what is also needed is is a bit of campaigning from the health professionals. So I think you have very excellent and very true points, and I agree with Maria that you're more than politicians. You're more people believe you more than they believe politicians. So I think it's very valuable if you raise your voice, and there's of course a million ways in which you can do that. So the other day we had climate scientists who are no longer filing another report, but said you don't read them anyway, so we will go to the Ministry of of Economic Affairs and Climate, and we will blockade at the entrance to basically have an action to make us heard. But you can also, for example, in your white coats, wave Jette goodbye when he leaves for the climate conference, and I'm pretty sure you'll make headlines with it.
So enough ideas to go around.
So, well, these are a bit action ideas, but the climate movement is very broad, and there's excellent people that know how to do campaigning. So maybe you can team up with them and then just.
But do you think the climate movement and for example, the sector of medical professionals have been able to meet each other enough?
Well, I think I hear that there's a desire to do more.
Yeah.
So, and I would only welcome it.
Yep.
If I may, we have a movement, so you can join. I can provide you more details later on, but normally we have, in each COP, we have a big movement of health professionals joining forces. So please join in us. We would love to have MSF and medical students. We have already IFMSA, but definitely we want to have more.
Also accept the invitation to come to Parliament, I think. That's also a good idea.
Invitation to a white coat revolution, yes.
And also, both invitation accepted. Another question.
Hi, yeah. My name is Sam. I'm also a medical student, actually, but at the moment I'm following a minor program about disasters, climate change and migration. And I have a question for Judith, actually. We're working now we're doing a research for MSF Amsterdam, actually. I'm conducting interviews with employees, and I keep asking the same question, but it seems a bit taboo. They don't really answer it, so I'd like to ask you as director. So I just take this opportunity. Is MSF, or MSF Amsterdam at least, willing to increase or sustainability and circularity within their own organization at the expense of perhaps the medical aid you're providing?
Go ahead.
I was told I should make sure that the camera sees me. I don't.
Very good idea.
Sure.
Oh.
Yeah, sure. I don't think it will be at the expense. So short answer. MSF has set, as a worldwide movement, it has set the bar on improving our own performance in 2030. We have to go 50% down in our CO2 emissions from 2019, which was the year just before COVID. And that is quite a challenge that we're working on right now. And it's very different from benchmarks that a lot of others have, because they have set the benchmark at, say, 1990, 1992. So we need to improve at 2030 with 50%. That's one. Second, it's not going to go at the expense of the work we do, because it saves money and it improves the quality of our work.
Okay, thank you.
Is there room for one final question? Two? First over here, please.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for tonight. My name is Lianne Wellens. I'm a doctor and currently also an advisor for the Groene Zorg Alliantie, the Green Healthcare Alliance. What I think is really important tonight is what we talked about, that climate crisis is a health crisis. But I also have a question for Joris Thijssen, because one thing that we haven't addressed tonight is that our own healthcare system in the Netherlands is actually quite a mass polluter. We provide 8% of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is caused by the healthcare system in the Netherlands. And I was wondering if that's something that's at the moment playing in Parliament and how the PvdA would address that.
Yes and no, I guess. So we have, there's a target in the Netherlands to reduce CO2 emissions. And that target is broken down in all kinds of sectors, and one is the housing sector or the building sector. And I guess that's what you refer to with the hospitals. So in basically that area, there's lots of policies to make sure that hospitals, but also other buildings, get more energy efficient. The challenge is that at the moment it's by far not going fast enough. So that's the debate we have with the Minister De Jonge, to make sure that he speeds up those programs and make sure that improvements are made and the targets are met.
Thanks very much for the last question. My name is Martina. I work as a climate activist and health activist, actually, health justice activist for Reclame Fossilvrij, as a campaigner, fossil-free advertising. And I'm from the same climate movement as Joris is, and now also trying to reach to the health justice community to speak up against actually the fossil fuel industry, because I feel like this is a very big elephant in the room all the time, and nobody's really talking about against the fossil fuel industry, that they're on purpose, like, keep on growing, for example, by the marketing machine. So my question is to Maria Naira, like, what do we do to get all these doctors, the physicians and health professionals to speak up against the fossil fuel industry?
Well, you probably saw Can I?
Sure.
No, you probably saw very recently a communique, a report saying that WHO joining forces with many other groups asking for a fossil fuels non-proliferation treaty. And our Director General has been very strong on saying that our addiction to fossil fuels is a sabotage, a human health sabotage. We are creating, as I say, this big network of health professionals to which you are definitely very much invited. And of course, we recognize that in certain countries there might be a transition through other sources of energy, but we need to accelerate the transition to renewable sources of energy as a matter of urgent health protection and promotion. The other thing is that regarding the health system, globally, obviously the middle and high-income countries, we produce approximately, we contribute to 5% to the global carbon footprint. And that's why we have a health commitment from COP26 last year to decarbonize the health system. I hope, I don't know now that if the Netherlands has joined this coalition called Attach, but this is a very ambitious strategy to lead by example. I mean, the health system can reduce emissions, and this is very rewarding for the health professionals. It's protecting the health of the people, and is making a lot of savings in terms of cost at the hospital level. So this is a strategy that we are launching now. The National Health System in UK has committed to decarbonize, carbon neutral by 2040. But we are learning all, and then we want to promote that as a way of leading by example. I mean, proving that the health system can be very consistent. But we need to divest on fossil fuels and most of the health insurance companies. So there are many, many things that we can do, and we need to influence for it and raise our voice, health voice for it.
I hope that some part answered your question. Judith, I promised I would return to you in the end. You were hoping to see coalition making. You were hoping to see some new perspective, maybe even new narratives. How did we manage? Maybe if.
For final speech. The thing with standing here makes what you say, it has to be more important than what you were going to say, and that is after such a full night a problem. Yes, I do think I saw a coalition, and I saw a coalition with people in the hallway, in the audience as well, and I saw somebody making it very personal, giving us health issues in Amsterdam, heat maps in Amsterdam, and diseases that we might catch ourselves. So I leave here hopeful because what we add is another layer in the debate. But I also leave a little more pessimistic, because you asked a question earlier on paying the bill or picking up the bill. And the bill is being picked up. The bill is being picked up by those mothers with those malnutrition children that I saw in Chad, and the bill is picked up by those people trying to, in Pakistan, try to find their house back and their livelihood back. And slowly the bill is being picked up in the Netherlands as well, when we have a shortage in summer, a water shortage in summer. So the bill is being picked up, and our challenge together is to make sure that it's being picked up by the right people. And that, I think, I would like to continue working on with all of you. Thank you.
So I think the message has been urgent and the call has been clear. We pick up the bill and we make sure that we build the coalitions that are needed. And I think in the spirit of Maria, we do this through a health lens and not through a disease lens. And I think we do this with hope instead of despair. And I think we have to do it together ultimately. So for now, I want to thank Amrish, Saskia, Anissa, Joe, Jeffrey, Maria, Joris, and Bertram. And I want to thank you and everyone who was watching from their homes. And I hope we can finish our conversation at a place called The Bar. And thank you for your attention.